Yo, 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 what's going on, guys? It's Buns. Welcome back to the Road to Gladiator. Today, I wanted to spend some time talking about a really big topic for anyone that's breaking into any sort of PvP going in World of Warcraft, and that is keybinds and macros. Now, I want to take some time to talk about this. I got a lot of requests from you guys to talk about what works for me, how do my macros work, how do my key bindings work, and also be able to give you guys some insight for yourself to be able to put yourself in a position where you have fluidity in your binds and you're comfortable with them. So let's jump into it, guys. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about with keybinds is something that I think people really overlook jumping in when they're starting a fresh character or they're coming back to an expansion, and that is centering your keybinds around the amount of usage that spell will get. So, for example, for a lot of people playing DPS across the board, it's really beneficial most of the time to have your damaging spells be 1 through 5, because that way they're spammable, they're easy to hit, and they're easy access. So for myself, I have Mutilate as 3, Envenom as 5, I have Poison Knife as 4, and I have my Artifact Weapon as 1. These are abilities that I will use frequently, outside of maybe the Artifact Weapon, but I currently like that spot. But it's very frequent abilities, and they're right around where my playstyle is, and that's around WASD. Now, I know most people will be playing around WASD, but there are some people out there as well, too, that try out, different positions, maybe ESDF, or they use just 2 keys to strafe. That's completely fine, too. And whether you are a DPS class or a healing class, for example, it's always great to put your abilities that are going to be in high usage right around where you're going to be playing. Now, myself personally, I like using the numbers for my damaging attacks, as I just feel like it's very straight and centered. And myself, pretty much for the beginning since I've played World of Warcraft, I've always associated CC abilities with putting them as letters near where I'm playing, something with, ERF. Those are usually big keybinds for me when I'm using CC moves. And that goes into my next statement that I want to talk about keybindings. Let's say that you are someone that plays multiple classes, or you're coming back from an expansion ago. There's going to be a lot of give and take with your keybinds, and what works for you is not necessarily going to work for me or your buddy, and you got to be able to have your own familiarity with your binds. And a lot of the times, for anyone that's playing multiple classes, or as I said, coming back from a previous expansion, it's really beneficial to use keybinds that overlap. So what I mean by that is, let's say that you play a rogue, like myself, and you play a mage. And let's say you're in a situation where you have ice block versus evasion for your big defensive cooldowns. Well, you could make them the same thing, so that way you're like, okay, this is my big defensive spell. I know when I'm going to use it, and I know what I'm going to get out of it on both classes. I don't really have to think about, oh, okay, well, shoot, I was just playing on my in-hand shaman, and I forget which my astral shift is. It's Z, and then I'm playing as my frost mage, and it's 6, and, you just start getting classes confused. For me, I always find it helpful to be able to overlap in as many areas as possible and try to coordinate. Well, it might not be exactly the same spell, because obviously there's different classes in the game, but kind of relay the same type of spell. So if it's a damaging spell, try to use that same bind for a damaging spell, or if it's a CC bind, use another CC bind that you have available on your other class. I always feel like having that overlap will give you a lot of fluidity when you're playing the game, and it'll make it so when you're jumping class to class, spec to spec, you will be able to compete and not have to think that much about what's going on with your bind. So first off, we have high usage abilities right around your WASD. I like doing my attacks as 1 through 5. You can also have CCs a lot of the time. For myself personally, I use ERFC a lot of time for CC. So in this class, I have Kidney Shot as E, I have Garrote as R, Sap as F, and those overlap with my other specs as well too. So when I'm playing different specs. Secondly, we have, are you able to remember what keybinds you're using for multiple specs, multiple classes? Having that overlap is super important. I just wanted to go back and hark on both of those points because I think that they're highly overlooked, and being comfortable with your own keybinds while swapping classes, I feel, is really important. So don't overlook those two. Wanted to give it a second take. Now, the third thing on the list is a interface that it's an interface setting that you can use that gives me a lot of help. And for some of you guys out there, you may be completely aware of this, and that's fine. This is not for you, but there are a lot of people out there that are probably going to be the first time hearing this. This is extremely helpful when it comes to key bindings, and a lot of times you hear people talking about focus casting abilities. Well, I was one of those players for the longest time where I was like, well, shoot, I have to have all these focus casting abilities, it's filling up my macro page. It's just overwhelming. I need to be able to, I have to just make so many macros. I wish there was an easier way to do this. Well, there is, and I'm going to show you. So you go into your escape settings, go into your interface, go to combat, and you can see there is a focus cast key. Now, what this does is you can set it to Shift, Control, or Alt, whichever you prefer, whatever's comfortable for you. And what that will do is it will open up you to be able to use whatever ability and then use your toggle key, your Shift key, and be able to use it on your focus target. So you don't actually... So it depends what key you pick, right? So for my case scenario, I'm using Shift as my focus key. You can use Control, you can use Alt, whatever's comfortable for you, but that way you have more fluidity. So if you are playing on a rogue, for example, and you've got two melee dancing back to back, but you want to make a swap onto your second focus target that's standing next to you, you can just easily, in my case scenario, hit Shift E, not think about it, and put your focus kidney onto it. And on top of that as well too, for all the setup purposes, you don't have to have all of those focus cast macros just filling up your logs. It's unnecessary. So that's going to help you guys out a lot. You don't have to worry about those macros. And it's something that I didn't know was in the game for a very long time. So I just put that information out there for you guys, for those it benefits, for those that you already know. Cool, you're in good shape. It's something really helpful going into the game. Now, the next thing that I had is something that I also was unaware was in the game for a very long time, longer than the Shift focus key, and that is arena targeting. Now, I always heard, I think the first time I heard anyone talking about arena targeting was in MoP, and I'm not innately an arena player myself. So the first time I ever heard people talking about it a little bit was in MoP, because that was the first time I ever touched endgame, and I was like, I don't even know what that is. Like, I was just trying to learn abilities and trying to figure out, like, okay, well, what's going on? I wasn't worried about any of that at the time. But I'm sure that there are a lot of you guys that are wondering the same question or are looking how to incorporate arena targeting into your gameplay, as it helps your fluidity a ton once you get comfortable with it in arena. So I wanted to show you guys where that is as well too. You hit escape, go to your keybinds options, and then you want to click on targeting, and you scroll about halfway down through your targeting, and you can see target arena enemy 1, 2, 3, which is really the ones that you want to worry on if you are in an arena situation, because there's not like 5v5s anymore. So having 1, 2, and 3 is usually sufficient. I personally use Alt QWE as my targeting, and then I use Alt ASD for my focus arena 1, 2, 3. So now what this does, for those of you guys that are not familiar with it, is when you jump into a game, there are, let's say you jump into a 3v3, right? There are 3 targets on the right-hand side of your screen, and they will be ordered randomly. But you want to be able to be more efficient, basically, with using your keybinds and not have to worry about changing focus all the time. It gets to be a nightmare when you're spending, 3 seconds trying to swap your focus when you could be using spells at that time. It just prevents, it takes away the headache, right? It's a headache relief before it even happens. So basically, this allows you to be able to be like, okay, I know which target's which. The hunter is the second target, so I'm going to use Alt-W to target him rather than having to go over to my mouse, go try to click him. I don't have to worry about that once you get used to your key bindings. And coming from someone that had to get used to it, it is weird at first. It's weird. Give yourself a lot of leeway. Honestly, give yourself some leeway, because I still, to this day, catch myself using tabs sometimes. Just to, I'm lazy. I want to target the thing nearest, the target nearest to me. But the efficient way to do it is be able to just, you know what? He's the second target, Alt-W, I got the hunter. And more than anything, the best part about it is really when you got the focus cast keys down, because that allows you, especially something like a rogue or a mage, it really allows you to easily swap targets that you can CC and not have to think about it as much, which I think is extremely helpful for just having that fluidity there. And once you get comfortable with the keybinds, you're jumping around targets, you're good, you're completely fine, and you don't have to worry about finding them, clicking them, or having a set focus macro or anything like that. Very easy, just takes a little bit of time. So once again, that is keybinds, targeting, and it's about halfway down the page, guys. Very helpful. You don't have to have any macros for it. It's right there in your keybinds, so it's completely fine. If you do want to have macros for it, at the end of the day, it basically accomplishes the same thing, except you've taken up 6 macro slots. But it is there in your keybinds as well, too. That's the easiest way to do it, so that's how I'm going to show it. Now, this is something that I will recommend to some of you. It'll be helpful, and other people will not, but I'm going to throw it out there. there are a lot of people that I feel like having clean user interfaces. Obviously, you can tell I am not one of those people, or I've not gotten myself to the point where I want to do that, but going into the future, it's probably something that I do want to add into my game. So I want to show you guys how to put yourself in a position if you want to be able to track your big cooldowns, you're familiar with your normal damaging abilities, so if you're comfortable knowing where, your Mutilate is, your Eviscerate, your Envenom, whatever class you're playing, Frostbolt, so be it. If you're comfortable with your main keybinds that are very spammy and you want to change those into defensive keybinds just so that you can see when the cooldown's coming up, I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So I think one of the best examples that I could provide for you guys is Vendetta. So what this does is we're going to make a macro for Feint, right? And Feint for me in 3v3 arenas, when I talent into it, is going to make me take 30% less damage. No cooldown on it. It just costs like 20 energy. So it's something that's spammable, right? That's a great example of a keybind that you should be doing this for. So I'll take my Feint here, and you can see though when I drag it on, I have hashtag Showtooltip Vendetta. So what you can do is when you are wanting to track the cooldown of a big cooldown spell for yourself, such as Vendetta, maybe a defensive, and you want to overlap it on top of a spell that you can just spam, such as Feint, where you don't have to think about it, you don't have to track that cooldown. What you want to do is you want to have hashtag Showtooltip space whatever the ability is. So in this case scenario, I'm using Vendetta. I will have all of the macros down for you guys below that I'm talking about in the video, because I know that no one wants to like type shit out. I get it. So I'll have all the macros down below. I got you on that one. Don't worry about it. If you want to use this format, great. Hashtag Showtooltip, whatever spell you want to track, and then afterwards just do /cast Feint. Now, going back to something we talked about earlier, let's say, you are playing a Destruction Warlock and you're using Chaos Bolt in this example. Well, don't worry about if it's a damaging spell, whether or not you have to have the focus macro built into that, because you don't have to. As long as you go into your interface, combat, and you set your shift focus key, you don't have to worry about having these really intensive macros. This is very simple. If this is something that you want to add to your game to be able to recognize big cooldowns, see them more efficiently, absolutely opt into it. It's a great way to help yourself get a little bit better awareness without having to do much to your keybinds at all, as long as you're familiar with it. The next thing I want to go into is something that I had an extremely hard time finding this information about on the internet. And I feel like that's one thing that is crappy about the World of Warcraft PvP section right now, is there's no center for information, so it's really challenging, I think, a lot of times to find information on keybinds and macros. So this is one of the main reasons I wanted to talk about it, and I know this information here is going to help a lot of people out, and that is adjusting your frames, your arena frames to be specific. So for myself personally, in the game, I have 4 different scripts, and I will be really honest with you. I do not really know how they work. I had to spend an inordinate amount of time just testing to get it to the point where I wanted it to be. Had to do a lot of spell adjustments, but I'm going to show you guys generally what each one does, and if you like the arena scripts that I'm using, you are more than welcome to use them. I like them personally. They're centered in the middle of the frame, so I'll show them to you guys, give you a general idea of what each one does, and then if you like them, I'll put them down below so that you guys can have them as well too, because it helps with your awareness and seeing things. So the first one I have here is test frames, and that basically pops up the frames on the middle of your screen. Hang on, let me reload my UI really quick. I was playing some games earlier, and they wouldn't be centered there right off of the bat. So I'll reload my UI here. Okay, so normally, there you go. You have your test frames, and you can see that they are up in the top right corner, where they would normally be with normal size in the arena. So that just allows you, this macro allows you to mess with it outside of the arenas, to mess around where you want the frame position, to help you get an idea with that. The second macro I have increases the size. So not only does that help you see where everyone's at better, just get a better idea of which target's which, it also helps you see their cast bars and everything going with that too, for better awareness on casts and getting a better, it just helps you get a better feel while you're in the arena. You don't have to think about it as much. The third macro I have is going to move all of my frames over to the left which is great. We're starting to center ourselves, and then finally the fourth frame drops it down, so we have it in, the middle right area of my screen. So here's my character. If I'm playing the game, it's right on the right of where I am, which is great because all of the cast bars for all these guys are going to be right here, and it's much easier to see the cast bars here and be able to have a better chance at seeing the kicks, seeing the cast, so that I can recognize when I need to be able to kick, and it just gives me more information on what's going on in the map. Believe it or not, too, probably one of the best things that's personally helped me is that getting used to arena targeting keybinds, it's really helpful just to remember that they're right next to your character. So being able to, instead of having to look into like the top right corner and being like, oh god, which one's the hunter? You don't have to think about it as much because it's right next to your tune. Little things like that do add up, and especially for like newer people coming into the game, I had to go through that hurdle, so I think it's something that could help a lot of people out there too. Now, as I said up front, this took me a ton of trial and error to set up these macros to get them to the point where they are now. I don't have a ton of information if you want them in different slots, but if you do like the positioning of where my frames are, you can absolutely use them and do little tweaks here and there to the last two macros to see if you want to move the positioning just a little bit. Up to you. I will also put them down in the description below. Now, outside of that, the only other macros that I really use is I have arena jump shadow step macros to both of my teammates, which basically allows me to have a keybind, which I use as alt scroll up and alt scroll down. So if I'm in a situation where I need to retreat, I can shadow step to my teammate without having to think about it, not having to click on them and then use the keybind. It's just all in one action. All you have to do is basically type their name into a macro, and you can adjust it with the people you're playing with. So in this case, I was playing with my buddy. His name is Shaka, and I put his name into the macro. I will also have this down below for you guys, so you don't have to worry about typing it, because that's ridiculous. I have it down below for you guys. I got you on that. Very helpful. The only other macro I have on top of that as well too is shadow step kick 1 2 3. I talked about this in a video that I put out I think earlier this week, when we were talking about having cross CC and being able to interrupt your off target from your main target and your focus target. Having that third kick is really important a lot of times. So I found myself wanting to make shadow step kick 1 2 3 macros. I will also have those down below for you guys if that is helpful to you. Finally, the last thing that I want to say is everyone's keybinds are going to be different, and different things are going to work for different people. I think that it's important to be open to the fact, especially when you first start playing the game, be open to wanting to change your keybinds. Look for what works, look for what doesn't. If you ever see yourself like in an in-game situation where you're like, man, like I feel like I couldn't execute what I wanted to do here because of my keybinds, well, maybe you take that time after the game to be like, okay, well, I need to reevaluate where I'm putting these spells because, it just makes no sense for me if I want to shadow step kick this guy to have my shadow step be Q and then my kick is 6, right? Weird exaggerations, but you get the point. You guys could probably apply that to your own situations. You want to have fluidity in your bindings, and that's going to come with playing, testing things out, getting comfortable with what works. And when you do get things that do work for you, use them on that class and try to convert them to their other classes, like I was talking about earlier. Being able to have interchangeable binds with familiar spell usages, whether they're damaging spells, big offensive cooldowns, or big defensive cooldowns. I think having that in the back of your mind when you're playing a lot of different classes is good to overlap those bindings with whatever abilities suit the bind. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Hopefully this helps shed some light for those of you newer players jumping into the game, because I know that key bindings and macros can be really overwhelming, and I wanted to take some time to just break it down. A lot of it's really easy stuff. Don't need to have focus macros. Set up your focus cast keybind and work with what works for you. It's going to be a lot of trial and error. I mean, if you guys theoretically hopped onto, my character with my binds, it's going to be completely different even if we're playing the same class, right? Go with what's comfortable for you, and if you see yourself in situations where it's not fluid or you're having a hard time executing because of your bind, well, consider making adjustments. Does it make sense if I move this here? Maybe I'll have a better time executing this combo if I do. Keep it simple. If it makes sense, it probably does make sense, and it might be uncomfortable at first to make the change, but later down the line you will thank yourself because you will have better fluidity in your gameplay. Once again, guys, all of the macros from the video will be down below. If you want to use them, absolutely feel free. I think a lot of them will help you guys. Thank you guys for all of the support. I will catch you guys on the live stream or on the next YouTube video. Peace, dudes. Keep it easy, everyone. Yo, 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 what's going on, guys? It's Buns. Welcome back to the Road to Gladiator. Today, we're going to go through our third Arena Raw footage series. Now, over the last couple of days, I've been leveling up my artifact weapon for